Well, hey everybody, and welcome to this midweek review with Mr. John. As you can tell, I'm kind of sitting by, the lights are kind of flickering, and it reminds me of sitting around a campfire. Man, I love sitting around a campfire. There's two things I really love when you sit around a campfire. And of course, I bet you can guess number one, the s'mores. I love s'mores. You know, you get that marshmallow and you get it on the prongs or whatever and you stick it over the fire. Now, I can tell a lot about a person by how they toast their marshmallow. There are those that will take the marshmallow, they'll stick it way above the fire, and they will wave it around, and then they come back, and it still looks like a marshmallow. It's a little mushy, but it's not what I would call a good campfire marshmallow. Let me tell you how I do my marshmallows when I go camping. I stick that baby right in the fire. I catch that marshmallow on fire, and then I got me a flaming torch. I look like the Statue of Liberty. I stand there and I let that marshmallow burn until it's almost burnt up. Then I blow out the thing, let it cool, take my graham cracker and chocolate, squeeze it together. I like that black stuff that comes on the outside. I just like it. It's a bitter taste, but I like it. I know some of you are just looking at me going, well, I'm out. I'm not listening to this guy anymore. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But trust me, for me, that's just the way I like my marshmallows. The other thing I like when you're sitting around a campfire, you know, somebody usually will start, there's a time in there always, it seems like always, when it goes quiet. Everybody's just kind of sitting around and they're looking into the fire and they're trying to see what they see in the fire. And there's a few people throwing a few extra sticks, but it gets quiet, right? And then something usually happens. Somebody either starts to sing songs like Kumbaya, my Lord. They start to sing, or somebody starts to tell a story. You know, sometimes they're scary stories because it's night, the lights are flickering, but sometimes it's a great conversation story. And in the Bible, something like this happens around a campfire. One day, the disciples, this is after Jesus' death, and the disciples, they have seen Jesus return back in the room, but they're still in this kind of shocked moment, right? And they're out fishing. Remember, the disciples, most of them were fishermen by trade. So they are out fishing and they aren't catching nothing. They are like, oh, they throw out the nets, pull it back, there's nothing. And I imagine as trained fishermen, they are like, well, there ain't nothing out here. I ain't catching nothing. When somebody along the beach comes walking up and says, hey, you guys catching anything? And I don't know what the disciples thought. They had to figure the guy's seeing we ain't caught nothing. This guy's just joking around with us. And he goes, hey, no, we ain't caught anything. And the guy goes, well, I tell you what, throw your nets on the other side of the boat. Now, as trained fishermen, you would think, yeah, we know what side of the boat to throw our nets on. This is the way. But I think there was some recollection of how they met Jesus the first time. Remember, Jesus walked up and said, hey, throw your nets over. And they did, and they caught a bunch of fish. So the disciples throw the nets over, and immediately, boom! The boat starts to go down. The nets are full. They're struggling. And Peter is standing there and it's like this light bulb moment. Boom! Oh my goodness. He realizes that the man on the beach is none other than Jesus. Peter, they're like 100 yards off the shore. Peter doesn't care. He dives off the boat. I don't know if he did a swan dive, belly flop, boom, right in the water and swim. But he is off the boat. And he goes down and he meets up with Jesus. while the other disciples have to drag in this heavy load. The load's so heavy it's taking the boat down. They have to drag this loaded net and boat of fish back into the shore. By the time the disciples drag in all these fish, Jesus is building a fire, and he invites all the disciples around the fire for a fish breakfast. He's going to campfire up some fish for them. Man, I don't know if you like that, but man, campfire fish, there's nothing better. So they're sitting around the fire, and I imagine they're sitting there having a good time, eating, conversations going. And I tend to think that all of a sudden the conversation stops, and they're kind of looking and just maybe waiting for Jesus to say something. And Jesus directs his attention to Peter. And he looks at Peter, and he says, "Simon, do you love me?" Now remember, Peter's name was Simon, and Jesus renamed him Peter. So, "Simon, do you love me?" And Peter's reaction is, "Oh yeah, you know I love you, Jesus. You know I do." And Jesus says to Peter, "Feed my lambs." A little bit of time goes by, I imagine, and Jesus looks at Peter again, and he goes, "Simon, do you love me?" And Peter in that moment probably, "Well, you just asked me this, but yeah, Jesus, I love you." And Jesus looks at Simon or Peter and goes, "Take care of my sheep." And I don't know if Jesus asked this right away or if it was a little hesitation, but then he looks at Peter again and goes, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter in this moment is actually hurt. His feelings are hurt. Now imagine if you're asked something over and over and over again, you either think, well, they don't think I'm listening, or they might think, well, I'm just hard-headed or not very bright, right? And Peter responds, "Jesus, you know that I love you." And Jesus says, "Feed my sheep." And so we tend to see this as Jesus is getting to Peter. And remember, Peter had denied Jesus 3 times before the rooster crowed. And I think that Jesus asking Peter 3 times this question kind of is an homage to that. He's saying, "Listen, I remember you denied me 3 times. I'm going to ask this question of you 3 times." But each time he said, "Feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, feed my sheep." Here's the question. Throughout the New Testament and the Gospels, Jesus was a carpenter. He didn't have sheep. He didn't take care of sheep. I wonder what Jesus was talking about when he said, "Feed my lambs and take care of my sheep, feed my sheep." Well, what Jesus was talking about was you and me. Jesus was giving Peter the rock, is what Peter became known as. He became the foundation of the churches that we have all around the world today. He is one who really started the church. And Jesus was bestowing this on him to tell the world, to tell people about Jesus. Feed my sheep. Give them the information about me. When we feed something, we're giving them food. He is saying, give the people me. Peter loved Jesus because he does that very thing. Think about it. Look at all the churches throughout the world. Go to a little town and you will see there's probably more churches than there are other businesses. Because Peter knew that the world needed to know about Jesus. So guys, we're going to continue next week. I hope you're studying this verse. This is a good one. I hope you're studying it. Have a good week. We'll see you next time. Bye. Hope you like my fire. And our verse is, He is not here. He has risen. Luke 24:6.